So why don't we get started, Vice Chair McIntosh, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome, everyone. So let me just get my agenda up here. So tonight, Chair Wilson she has a prior engagement, a prior obligation, so she will not be here for the first part of the meeting. So I will be facilitating the meeting tonight. And we do have some guest students here from Yale and UB. So in case you see some new faces, that's why. So I'm just going to welcome everybody to our February 25th board meeting. And we'll go ahead and get started with a statement first. So the PAB would like to extend its condolences to the family of Daniel Prude and all those struggling with this week's news. The Police Accountability Board knows that throughout our city's history, criminal prosecutions have failed to deliver justice for Black and Brown people harmed by police. This fact is why our community overwhelmingly voted to create a new system to hold the police accountable, the PAB. Every failure to deliver justice for officers' wrongdoing proves that the PAB needs to have its disciplinary powers returned, its investigations unimpeded, and its work fully funded. Thank you. So now I will turn it over to our executive director, and he will give us some updates on this past week's events.
All right, everybody. So I'm going to breeze through this so we can get to some discussion. Okay, so I want to give folks an update. Give me 1 second. There we go. Promise. Here we go. Okay. So there has been so much that the Police Accountability Board's been doing since our last formal board meeting, which is about a month ago. We can't discuss all of this tonight. But I want to just give a brief overview of what we're up to. We've been doing our protest oversight work. We held that fantastic hearing a few weeks ago, which over 2,500 people watched live. Phenomenal amount of engagement there. We're also doing this work with the city's policing reform plan, that Executive Order 203 work. And then we're working on crafting a kind of budget proposal. We're in the process, part of this budget process in the city. We aren't going to get to all these things tonight, in part because first, there's still some protests going on this week, and it's probably going to be in a better position for the board to discuss what's going on with the protest work next Thursday. With the city's policing reform plan, there is a meeting on Monday being hosted by the Police Accountability Board Alliance and Councilmember Mary Lupian that Chair Shawnee Wilson and I will be presenting at. So folks should definitely check in there for some updates there. And then on the budget process, that's still kind of up in the air. We're going to have a meeting with some city council people tomorrow. And next week, we're going to be able to talk as a board about next steps on that. And so I want to talk about what we are going to talk about tonight. First, we're going to go over that investigation into the pepper spraying of a handcuffed 9-year-old, where the PAB's work is with that. We're going to talk a little bit about the New York Attorney General's report on the death of Daniel Prude and a planned meeting with the New York Attorney General on that. And some other issues. We're going to talk about preparing for disciplinary hearings, and we're going to be letting speak these wonderful UB and Yale law students who will be introduced once we get to their section of the presentation. And then at the end of this meeting, we're going to talk about hiring updates and where we are with outside counsel. And so let's go to the investigation into that pepper spraying of a 9-year-old. It's officially Oversight Investigation 2021-2 for members of the public who are keeping track. There are two core questions that the Police Accountability Board is trying to get at with this investigation, which we launched the day that this information came out. The two big questions are this. First, what caused the PAB to pepper spray a handcuffed 9-year-old who was in crisis? And what needs to change to ensure that this never happens again? Remember, the Police Accountability Board doesn't have its disciplinary powers right now, but we still have the power to review the policies, procedures, and practices of the department. And that's the powers that we're exercising to figure out what's going on Harris Street. So our goals of this investigation are to reveal the facts to the public, propose changes, and then push for the implementation of those changes. So I want to start by, people have asked, a lot of people in the community have asked, we know that the Police Accountability Board launched this investigation. Why haven't we heard about any review, any outcomes, any recommendations that have come from this? And it's worth explaining to the public why. So let's start with what the city has told the public about our investigation. The city has said that all the documentation, all the records, all the reports, everything is with the PAB for review, and that there's been nothing that the city has held back. Police Department administration, we have all of the relevant documents to answer our big questions about what happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. But it's important that the public see what information we've actually received. But first, let's talk about what we need to answer those big questions and to figure out what happened on Harris Street. We need to know the sworn statements and reports from 12 to 15 officers. That's what the city says was created in the wake of the pepper spraying of the 9-year-old. Sworn statements from 12 to 15 officers. We need the complete body-worn camera footage, not just what was released to the public, but any body-worn camera footage that could possibly be relevant to the incident. We need all the non-public orders, directives, and policies that dealt with things like handcuffing, minors, pepper spray, how you call or utilize units like the person in crisis team. You need the emergency call records. You need all the training manuals and slideshows and all the other materials that are used to educate officers on how to deal with these situations. You'd need the internal affairs reports to figure out why the department decided to discipline some officers and decided not to discipline other officers. You need personnel files and training histories for all these officers to figure out if there was, were there appropriate staff sent to deal with this crisis. You'd need the incident-related emails to understand how officers were responding to this situation. And finally, you'd need answer to questions that documents can't provide. Like, what does this mean? What does this document mean? Why was this produced? What were people thinking? All of that. That's kind of the breadth of information you need to answer questions like, what caused the Rochester Police Department to do this? You need a significant amount of information. And if you didn't have all that information, you'd only have an incomplete picture of the scenario, which is why the Rochester Police Accountability Board has asked for the full and complete information to conduct a thorough review of this case. But here's what we've received from the city so far. We've received 8 police reports from 3 officers. We've received the unredacted body-worn camera footage, but only that footage that has been released to the public. We've received 11 publicly available policy documents that are all available on the open data portal. And we've received the emergency call records from the Emergency Communications Department. Outside of that information, the board does not have anything else. We don't have the sworn statements from 12 to 15 officers. We don't have any non-public orders, directives, or policies. We don't have any training manuals or slideshows. We don't have any internal affairs reports or any of the other information on the left. So, and it's not just that, we don't have the information, it's the information we have is incomplete. The 8 reports from those 3 officers, they're redacted. They're missing, they appear to be missing pages. And so even with the information we have, we can't know the full facts about what happened, even through the lens of the papers that we received. Again, in total, the reports that we received add up to about 26 to 28 pages. So here are the questions that we can't answer until we have more information. What actually happened on Harris Street? What officers were on the scene? What policies or practices did those officers follow or not follow? What training did they receive? Why wasn't the person in crisis team activated? And why did the RPD say that officers were, quote, required to pepper spray a handcuffed 9-year-old? Those are important questions. We want to have them answered, but without more information, we simply can't. So something I want to emphasize, though, is that tomorrow the city has offered to have a meeting with us to make sure that we get the information we want. That's the purpose of this meeting. We've sent a number of letters to Corporation Counsel. We've been trying to get this information as much as we can, and hopefully this meeting will be a place where we can actually get all the information we need. And so after that meeting, which is at 11 a.m. tomorrow, it's with the mayor, it's with Corporation Counsel, it's with the president of City Council, it's with some City Council members. hopefully, we can make sure that moving forward, the PAB gets all the information it needs to ensure the public knows what actually happened and what needs to change. But that means that we can't talk about proposals that the PAB will officially put out yet because we don't have all the information. What we can discuss tonight is what the city has proposed already to respond to this situation. Now, if you remember, the city's draft policing reform plan was created, finalized days after the Harris Street incident. And so the city did put some proposals in that plan. And I'm wondering if maybe we could talk about them just a little bit tonight. The city's two proposals that directly responded to Harris Street were this. The first had to do with pepper spray. The proposal was for the city to, quote, consider banning, quote, irritants being used on anyone under the age of 18 and banning the use of those irritants on people between the age of 16 and 18, elders, and restrained people, unless there's a threat of serious bodily harm and there's no reasonable alternative available. The second city proposal is the following: banning officers from handcuffing people under the age of 13 unless they present a danger to themselves or others. So those are the two core proposals that the city's kind of come up with to address Harris Street already. Now, obviously, the Police Accountability Board is going to be able to come up with its own proposals. But in speaking with some board members about this, there was some desire to have maybe right now a brief conversation about whether or not the city's proposals are the ones that we think are totally appropriate for the situation. Rabbi Settle?
So has the city given any information about what the decisions are based on? In other words, why 13? Is there any research, any evidence that they're looking at in terms of these policies?
I was not provided with that research during the meeting to create the plan.
Connor, I have a question. With this particular incident, they didn't know the age of the child until much later. So is there any policies that says, you know, what's your name? How old are you? Where do you live? I mean, if we could at least start with that. Because, you know, they didn't know her age until much later, until after she was pepper sprayed and the ambulance had to be called.
And Ida, the only thing I do want to say is that it's not clear that officers didn't know the age. It may be that some officers didn't know the age, but it's not clear that all the officers, including the first one on the scene, didn't know her age.
Dr. Harrison?
Connor, it seems to me that there's a preceding problem that I'd like to make sure that we get your opinion on, and that is this Corporation Counsel has been restrained in the information that they want to permit the RPD to disclose. If Corporation Counsel is acting as RPD's lawyer, that's no great surprise. Lawyers don't want any more information out there than has to be out there. That is in conflict with our need for transparency. And I have not heard any proposal yet of how to resolve these two apparently incompatible objectives.
That's a great point, Dr. Harrison.
Bob, what I'll say is that, Corporation Counsel will be at tomorrow's 11 a.m. meeting where we'll discuss this. I think that this obviously, before this meeting, I was in a meeting with staff from San Diego and Syracuse's civilian review boards, where they spent about 15 minutes talking about conflicts of interest with their Corporation Counsel and the obvious need to get outside counsel to do their work. So the answer in other communities is the one that is also baked into our city charter, which is having the civilian review board have the power to have independent counsel, because Corporation Counsel will always be essentially defending the police department.
And this is definitely something that we've brought up in previous meetings with council.
I don't understand how having our own independent counsel cures that.
Oh, cures the fact that corporation counsel will be resistant to transparency.
Yeah, they're still going to defend the RPD. That's their job. That's what the city charter mandates.
That's right. Well, you know, that is their job, but their job is also to follow the law. And the law says that the Rochester Police Department has to provide the Police Accountability Board with the information it needs to do its job. The law also says the Police Accountability Board has the power to issue subpoenas to get its information. And, you know, those laws have to be followed along with corporation counsel's need to protect the interests of their client. And so resolving those conflicts may be difficult, but following the law isn't.
Thank you. Danielle, Board Member Tucker. You're mute.
I'm sorry. My question, it was kind of piggybacking off of what Board Member Perez had stated about the age. So as we saw from the videos, some of the officers did know that the age of the girl. Is there anything? It's kind of, we know how a lot of the officers just came. I think it was Shani had explained this once before, that normally if an officer is not on duty at a specific case, that they'll find themselves just going to a scene that's already something happening. So I think that's kind of probably what happened with the Harris Street case. But is there any like procedure or policy in place to where if you're an officer and you are called to assist with the case, is there any policy in place to where you need to you need to give the information to the officer that's just coming on, so the ball won't be fumbled like it was this time? Because the initial officer that was de-escalating the situation, he knew the age. The age was brought up multiple times by the young girl and then also by the mom. However, when officer number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 came into play, I don't know if that information was transferred over. So is there some type of policy or like procedure in place to where you don't need to assist with something unless you're specifically called? And if you are, this information needs to be given before anyone is put in handcuffs or pepper sprayed?
It is a question that has an answer. With the information we have, we don't know. There are absolutely policies, procedures, and trainings that have to do with dispatch. There are absolutely policies and procedures and trainings that have to do when mental health people are called instead of officers, who's assigned to the case, whether or not officers with crisis intervention team training are assigned. There's policies and rules. We just don't have them, but we're going to get them.
Board Member Brown.
Great evening again. There's one of the things that concerns me with the proposed city policy about possibly pepper spraying teenagers, people between the ages of 13 and 18 or whatever. There has to be another way to deal with and handle difficult people without chemicals. I'm sure, beyond a reasonable doubt, that young people who have been in crisis homes and various things, people with mental illness that act up, there are ways to deal with them without handcuffing them, without pepper spraying them. And we need to look at how our officers are trained. The other thing that, and I don't know how we could get to this, there seems to be a culture in the Rochester Police Department that everything is command and demand. If you don't immediately adhere to their command and they then demand that you do something, then their next reaction is totally over the top. And that could be the way they're trained. There does not seem to be any compassion to anything that they do. And there needs to be a way for them to be retrained to realize that these are people that they're dealing with. I don't care what the policy says. You ought to see the client that you're there to serve as a person. You can see this as a child. At some point, child should have entered the officer's head. When there's a dialogue between the young lady and the female officer that she asked for. Can I have a female officer? The female officer says to the girl, "You're acting like a child." The child responds, "I am a child." That should have immediately said, "Wait a minute, hold up. I need to address this differently." But no concern. There did not seem to be, I can't say no, there did not seem to be or appear to be any concern, any compassion, or any inkling that this is a child that I should handle differently than I would if I were dealing with an adult.
Yeah. Board Member Perez, I think you had another question. Okay. So I definitely agree with you, Board Member Brown. I think it was, I wondered if it was one of the male officers that actually said that, but there wasn't a lot of room to, for the female officer to even start de-escalating. And when she was seeming to have some conversation with the girl, it just seemed like the conversation just kind of went left, I would say. So I definitely echo what you're saying in regards to the chemical irritants. Even as a healthcare provider, there are certain medications that we don't use on children because they haven't been tested in children. So I would say even we don't know the implications or the consequences for such chemical irritants. So I would also be curious to know how they arrived at that certain age of that requirement for the irritants for the going forward. Did anyone else have any comments on this? Okay, I'll turn it back over to Executive Director Connor.
So the next thing on our agenda is to speak about.
So wait,
Oh, please.
wait.
Go ahead.
Weren't we going to talk about, oh, well, I guess we can't decide right now, but weren't we going to talk about whether we wanted to support those recommendations? I thought that's why you raised them.
I think the idea is to have them as a starting point for conversations about our own
Okay.
recommendations. Just so people can know what the city's response to this is already. Because I think that we're going to have to, as we're all processing, there's so much information we don't know. And it's when we have that information, we can make fully informed proposals. So next up is the Attorney General's announcement about the grand jury decision in Daniel Prude's case. Obviously this board can't talk a lot about the outcome, what specifically happened in that case, because especially now, if we get our disciplinary powers back, there's a very good chance that this board may be the one to hear that case. And so we have to be very careful about what we do and don't say about cases that could come before us, concrete cases. What we can talk about is the Attorney General's report itself, and the Attorney General's announcement. And the Attorney General, for those who don't know, when she came to town to give to announce the results, she met with a number of different groups and folks, and the PAB did not get a meeting, though the Attorney General did reach out and say that a meeting needs to happen. And so there will be a meeting between the board and Attorney General. It will happen hopefully next week. It will be virtual. And so I didn't know if there's anything that board members wanted to say about that. I know Arlene had spoken briefly about maybe a thought about community input on that. I don't know if you want to address that.
Board Member Brown.
Well, yes, I'd like to very much know when we go to what the community would like for us to ask when we meet with the Attorney General. I'm sure that with the things that happened and the report that they heard, that there are many members of the community who would like to, if they had an opportunity to, question, a comment. So I would like very much if they could put it in the chat, and we will be the mouthpiece to take their questions and concerns directly to the Attorney General, especially now that we happen to have her ear and all eyes are on Rochester. Can I'm gonna say, can I get an amen? Are there any other board members that have a comment or concern, or am I so far in left field that you all don't agree with me?
No, I mean, personally, I think it would be good for the community to weigh in, because I do feel like there are a lot of questions. You know, there's just been a lot of injustices that this community has seen, and they want to talk about it. And, you know, if we can, you know, have a listening session, or maybe have review, you know, maybe do a PowerPoint and review some of what we're seeing in the report. And just like you said, open up it, give it an opportunity to have these conversations, create that space, so the voices can be heard. I think that would be a great idea, but I'll let others weigh in.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important for the community, you know, to be able to, again, weigh in this conversation that we're going to have. You know, maybe people can submit some questions beforehand, and that way we can kind of, you know, sort them out. I know that a lot of people commented, you know, during her press conference. So I know, you know, in different platform, people had questions there as well. So maybe collecting some of those ahead of time. You know, I would hate for people to submit questions and then we're not able to answer them all. But if we're able to get some ahead of time, I think that would be helpful, you know, for us and also for her and for the community. So we make sure, because some questions are going to be repeated. And so that way we can try to cover as many questions as we can.
Thank you. Board member, I'm not sure who was next. Okay, Nikoloff.
I actually think Board Member Tucker was up before me.
Yeah, I can't. You're. Go ahead, Tucker.
Say point to her.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah, I think you're like right on the mark, Board Member Brown. Definitely, I think the community should weigh in. Just something I agree with what you guys said as well, but just a piece that's no one mentioned just yet. I think like as the Rochester community, I kind of feel like we kind of feel defeated. I don't think people really understand the process. Anytime like a lot of times when we see cases that we feel are very clear cut, and we get this type of outcome, I think as the case numbers grow, the patience and the belief in the justice system decreases. And I feel as though with this particular case, just because on so many different levels, we felt as though it was just very, just through the videos that was put out to the public, you know, the arrogance of the officers, just, you know, the lack of professionalism, mental health. It was on so many different fronts, we feel as though the decision should have been the other way. So I know just a lot of people that reached out to me personally, they just feel defeated and they just don't really understand, like, okay, so how does this work? How does the justice system work? What's the process? What's the procedures? What do you need to do? You know, like, what do you need to do to get, you know, to convict an officer? And one of the most important questions that I was asked that I could not answer myself, and even after research, I couldn't answer, was what laws were the officers protected under? Someone asked me that. It was like, so what laws are the police officers protected under? Because I need to be under those laws, because it seems as though they could commit murder on any front in front of the Pope and they're still not going to get convicted. So what are the laws that's protecting them? just so maybe we can clearly tell the get those questions answered. What laws were the officers protected under? So we can kind of explain it more.
I would say that I think we all know that there are a lot of loopholes in a lot of the criminal laws that currently exist for officers. So in terms, and I was asked the question today about how does the community heal? And it's kind of hard to heal from trauma when you're actively in a traumatic situation, right? So, we know that the community is getting weary, as you mentioned, tired of marching, tired of, putting in the effort and getting the same result. But I would say, don't be discouraged. The PAB is here. We hear you. We see you. We're going to continue to demand justice and do the work that you elected us to do. So I would just say, yes, definitely we should have a listening session because we want those comments. We want to hear those voices because the community feels like their voice is not being heard. So I'll just pause there. Dr. Reverend Nikoloff, go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, 100% support some form of community comment, and I think pre-submission sounds like a great idea, but whatever we need to do. I did notice a few comments about the fact that the AG's press conference was held in a church. And I know I harp on this every meeting, but I think a large part of changing police culture is removing any kind of illusion that somehow because an announcement like that is made in the church, it somehow means that the officers have a moral underpinning to whatever they do that enables them then to be absolved. I think the optics of that are wrong. I think in a non-religious democracy, having a public decision like that, just because I get that there are cultural resonances and ways that are trying to comfort the public and lessen the impact of it by having it in a church. And at the same time, the entire public is not Christian. I know this as a Christian minister. That, believe me, most of the people in the city are not people who necessarily adhere to the Christian faith or the Christian practice. And I think continuing to associate public announcements or anything around law enforcement with any kind of religious body is problematic in shaping the kind of cultural enablement that enables officers to think that what they're doing is somehow a crusade against evil in the city, and therefore they're justified in doing what they want to do. To me, it feels kind of like a mafia movie where, like, the mafia does something bad, but then they go to mass the next day, right? I know but it's not that far off a comparison. We can't have any kind of association between our public institutions and any kind of religious body because it's against everything that we stand for as a democracy. And I think, I'm glad if there's police officers who have chaplains that are for particular traditions. I'm glad if they 100% practice their religious tradition. But when it's rolled out that way, when it's the Attorney General of the entire, of New York State making this announcement, from a particular religious vantage point, I find it extremely problematic. And I also find it personally as a big assumption that somehow, even as a Christian, that represents shared values with me as a Christian, let alone with people who aren't Christian, to assume that I would somehow to assume that, right? It says a lot, just that imagery. And again, I get that there's reasons for doing that in terms of caring for communities, in terms of trying to have that announcement come from a trusted place, but it is not a trusted place. If you look through the comment on the Facebook page, not just from white folk, but from folk across the spectrum, it is not a trusted place for everybody. It is not a place that represents everybody. And I don't know what policy that would look like or what kind of, but I certainly believe that it's really vital that if we're going to help to reform police culture, we also remove some of the ways in which religion and other things are used to somehow prop up and or support amoral or immoral policies, especially as what we saw there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in?
I just have a question for Reverend Nikoloff. I understand what you're saying. Do you have a suggestion as to a few other places that the announcement should have been made from?
City Hall, or any of the legal places where we have, there's a Supreme Court building downtown. There's all sorts of legally associated venues that are associated with the government, with the legal branch of the judicial branch of the government. It felt like a shield. It felt like instead of we're standing up there, do it from the public safety building. Any of the other places where this decision is related directly And frankly, I'm not just saying that as not in my church as a Christian, but it does not represent all of the people of Rochester. It looks like one religion is being favored, and it associates the police's behavior with the moral code of that religion, therefore giving it some sort of mythology of being right, or saying, hey, overlook this. And I think even if that's not what the intended message was, read some of the comments. And I'm telling you, as somebody who works with a different kind of population of religious folk than the ones that maybe they were trying to appeal to, it does not represent our whole city, and it certainly does not represent all of Christianity.
I agree with you, Reverend Nicholas. Good point.
Okay, thank you.
I just like to say that I agree with Matt.
Thank you. So I will turn it. Anyone else have any comments? If not, I'll turn it back over to Connor.
One thing I'll say is, if you are watching this right now, because we're getting questions in the Facebook Live, if you want to tell us what to ask the New York Attorney General, you can comment on this video. You can email pab@cityofrochester.gov. You can call us and leave a voicemail on our hotline. But if we are going to be able to do a listening session, we're going to be able to have other opportunities for people to hear in this. But if you have something on the top of your head, please tell us now. And already in the Facebook chat, people are saying, a lot of questions about what charges were and weren't brought. A lot of legal questions. Thank you for posting those in the comments. We're going to collect them and we will make them a part of our response here. So next step, because the UB and Yale people, I hope that listening to this board session has given you some information about how this board works, because now we're going to talk about your work. This project with the University of Buffalo and Yale, for folks who don't know, this is a crucial part of the board's response, not only to the present moment, but our work more generally. We don't have disciplinary powers right now. That's part of the reason that we couldn't hear cases about incidents like Daniel Prude or what happened on Harris Street. But we hope to have that disciplinary power come back soon. And when we do, we're going to need the policies and procedures in place so that we can have effective processes. We have this wonderful group of law students and lawyers who are willing to help us develop some of those rules. Their job is to help us craft our procedures for our disciplinary hearings. Our job is to help us research best practices and other models to think about when creating a system of justice for officer misconduct. Their job is going to drill down into specific parts of our process. They're not going to build the whole thing, but they're going to help us build concrete parts of it. And then they're going to present some proposed rules back to the whole board by April and May. So that's what they're here to do tonight, is to start doing their work. I'm going to let the wonderful Professor Allie Harrington introduce this entire team. But I just want to, on behalf of the board and the community, thank all of you for being willing to work on behalf of this board. We need every ounce of help we can get from the community and around. And I know that all of you are going to devote a significant amount of time, resources, and hard work to this project. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Professor Harrington.
Thanks so much, Connor. And I'm actually going to do the professor thing and turn it over to one of my students who's going to be taking the lead and guiding us through this presentation. But just wanted to say hello. It is so wonderful to meet you all. I'm Allie Harrington, and I direct the Criminal Justice Advocacy Clinic at the University of Buffalo School of Law. But I'm going to shut up now mostly and let the students do the talking. So let me turn it over to Cecilia Meyer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecilia Meyer, and I'm so happy to be here and be part of this project. I'm a 3L at the University at Buffalo, and I'm from Henrietta, so I have connections to Rochester, and I'm really thrilled to be able to be part of a project that's local. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm just introducing our team today. I'm going to have all my team members introduce themselves and tell just the board what school they're at and what year they are. And then I'm also going to then pass it on to Liz, who's going to give a more detailed overview of our project. And then Abigail is going to then pose some questions to the board so we can further fine-tune our research. So I'm going to pass it over to Madeline to start introducing herself.
All right, hello. My name is Madeline Cook. I am a second-year law student at UB, and I'm very excited to be here, so thank you for having us.
Welcome.
Simone, do you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is Simone Grande, and I am a second-year student at UB Law, and I'm originally from Syracuse, and I'm really happy to be a part of this project. So thank you so much for allowing us to help you guys out.
Welcome. Thank you.
Stefan, are you ready to go?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stefan Seitz. I'm a first-year law student at Yale Law School. Thanks so much for having us here tonight. I'm already learning a lot, and I'm very excited to work on this project. Thank you.
Welcome.
Abigail.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby, and I'm a 2L here at UB. I'm so excited to meet all of you and work on this project.
Welcome.
Liz, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Jacob. I'm a 1L at Yale Law School, and I'm just going to go ahead and give us a little bit more of a background on some of our research and what we are thinking, just to lay out some foundation. But I just want to take a step back and just thank you all so much. We are so honored to be here. We're so grateful that you shared time in your meeting to allow us to come and get to meet you all. And we are just so thankful for the service that you all are providing to the people of Rochester. And we are really honored to have this opportunity to serve alongside you all. So as Connor mentioned, our big goal here is to be a resource to you all and to do everything that we can to try to help you all think about the disciplinary and accountability procedures you would like to have. So to do that over the next few weeks, we're going to spend some time really digging into the research to understand the tools that have been used in other kinds of civilian review boards, in administrative processes, from public welfare benefits access to thinking about immigration courts, to looking at how teachers are disciplined, to really give you all a foundation to think about, but not to constrain our thought, but to think about building an even better foundation that allows us to build a safer, healthier community, and that really allows us to reflect your values and your vision and the community you want to have in the procedures that guide your process. So we are so excited to have this opportunity to dig into research, and our early research is going to take 3 parts. The first of which will really be looking at other civilian review boards across the country. So we'll be looking from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans to Seattle to give you all an understanding of how other boards have approached their processes, what procedures have shaped their systems, and how they've allowed for community input. So you can think about that and think about previous lessons and challenges and how you'd want to do even better. We will look at administrative processes throughout the federal and state government to give you an understanding of how the law has been used to shape administrative systems, to understand the tools that have been wielded, and to think even more about how you'd like to go further. And finally, we'll be digging into civil and criminal procedure to give you an understanding of what the nitty-gritty details look like to put something like this together as you think about shaping an entirely new system. So we are so excited to have this opportunity, and I will pass it on to Abigail, who'll talk a little bit about the questions that we have so that we can make sure we are centering everything we do on your vision and your needs and guiding it by this community you want to build. And we are here for you all. We're just so thankful that you will let us join you on this journey.
Thank you, Liz.
All right, so I have 2 kind of groups of questions. So the first is as follows. What does justice and accountability for individual police officers look like to you? What does justice and accountability for the Rochester Police Department look like to you? How do you think a formal set of rules for the accountability and police oversight processes help you achieve those visions? And how do you envision the Police Accountability Board changing policing? Do you think that's primarily by holding officers accountable or also in other ways? So anyone can jump in.
Abigail, what was that first question you had?
What does justice and accountability for individual police officers look like to you?
Well, I guess I would say that, I mean, in terms of what justice looks like, you know, they need to be held to that to be held to a standard. There needs to be, we know that this board itself was formed because out of over 900 complaints of excessive force, there was only like 6 of them that were, none of them were really sustained. 6 of them probably got some suspensions, if my memory serves me. No suspensions, I don't think completely. But, you know, out of 900 complaints, only 6 of those cases, you know, they really didn't have any outcome. There wasn't really anything that resulted from that. So that to me is not necessarily what accountability looks like. You know, so that needs to change. I would say that if, you know, we for me, it would just be having to hold them accountable. They should be held to the same laws that everybody else should be held to. There shouldn't be this, you know, these loopholes in these criminal laws for them. There just seems to be this layer of barriers to justice. So in terms of what that looks like, I would say that there need to be follow through with you know, the laws, or just follow through with whatever kind of just take a step back. So there just really needs to be that accountability. Community members need to know that if you do a crime, that you're going to be held accountable based on that. And when those things are not sustained, we know that essentially that has to be taken out. We want it to really not be in a bias system, in the sense that we really want the justice. The short version of my point is that there needs to be some kind of system in place to hold his police officers accountable. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place because I just have so many thoughts about this. But they need to be accountable. And what that doesn't look like 900 cases and only 6, you know, kind of with no repercussions. So I'll pause there so I can gather my thoughts, but I'll let someone else jump in. Let's say Bob Harrison.
Yeah, Danielle was before me.
Oh, Danielle, go ahead.
If I'm correct, you said, what does justice and accountability looks like to us? That was a question? Okay, perfect. All right. Justice and accountability for police officers. It looks like, me personally, I feel as though if you kill someone, like if you kill someone and they didn't serve any threat to your life, there was no gun, there was no, like, I'm talking about the clear cases that we've seen, you know, I don't think you should have a job. It doesn't sit well with me. I live in the city of Rochester. I've lived, you know, it just doesn't sit well with me knowing an officer did something so you know, to that extent, and still have a job while the community is mourning a life. So that accountability, like, there's a bunch of, and it's a bunch of different scenarios. I get it. There's a ton of different scenarios, and I acknowledge that. I understand that. But I just wanted to say that one first, because that's like the most upsetting, those are the most upsetting cases. Yeah. So that there, I don't think we should be, you know, officers should be able to get away with, I thought my life was in danger, but there's no knife, there's no gun, the person is in handcuffs, nothing, and they still go on administrative leave, get paid, come back, still have a job, and then police in the same community. I've seen it with my own eyes, like literally with my own eyes, seen an officer, and it's like a slap in the face. So that's what justice looks like to me. But also, it needs to be a process in place. just for, like the not so serious cases. It does need to be a process in place, and there needs to be clear consequences, not the vagueness. We need to stay away from the vagueness, like very clear consequences of how you would be held accountable. Like in writing, how would you be held accountable? If you make a bad judgment call, we have to set a standard for police officers. I know as an individual, as a kid growing up, I teach middle school. My students look up to police officers. Like that's a job that you want to have growing up. So they're like put on a pedestal, and we have to understand as you're put in that pedestal, you got to be held to a certain standard. So for certain excuses it's not okay because you're on that pedestal. We're calling you for help. So when you break our trust, it's not okay. Yeah, I don't know. My words are kind of jumbled, but the point I'm trying to make is that if you're police officers, I think we all know they're put on a pedestal. That's like a profession, really important profession. So you have to be held to a standard, and we got to expect I expect certain things from police officers. It's just certain things. You can't give me an answer if I ask you a question and you just say, oh, I don't know. And it's specifically about your profession. I'm a teacher. It's unacceptable. It just doesn't fly. It's just unacceptable. It's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what to do in that. Like, you can't do that. So we got to hold them to a standard. And if they don't have the training, we need to get them the training. But yeah.
I'm not sure who was next.
Yeah,
Here.
I think it's me now.
Okay, go ahead.
I hope I don't ramble too much, but the thing that concerns me about the questions that you've asked and the talk that we're having is trying to identify what the actual fundamental problem is that we're trying to solve. And I'll just postulate this just for the hell of it, that what I'm trying to produce is an environment where if I'm surrounded by 5 or 6 police officers, I actually feel comfortable. I actually feel protected. I have a this is only going to take a minute. I have a nephew who spent 6 years working as a civilian in Germany on a army base. Spent 6 years. I was really excited because when I was in college, I took German. So I asked him, how much German did he learn in the 6 years that he was in Germany? And his answer was that he didn't learn a single word. He didn't learn a single word because he didn't have to. He never went into Germany as such. He stayed on army bases and lived on army bases. And 20% of our police are ex-armed forces. And I think they've carried that same pattern back home, that you don't live with the foreigners that you occupy. You live in a separate base somewhere out in I don't know, one of the suburbs, and you only come into town when it's time to patrol. So that's not an answer. That's more questions.
Okay. Arlene Brown, Board Member Brown.
Yes, excuse me. Discipline to me would look less like a vacation. When officers are disciplined, they're put on suspension, and it's a week, 2 weeks of paid suspension. We did have an opportunity to see that was put out to the public, some disciplinary things. And the officers that were disciplined got 1 or 2 lines of shouldn't have done that in their report. That's, to me, is less than a slap on the hand. I followed a case last year of a gentleman who was at a bus stop in a wheelchair. And no, he was not selling drugs. He had a confrontation with police who turned him over in the chair. Clearly was not a threat. Whatever they were demanding, and I had said before, command and demand, and if you don't meet the demand, then it's force. And he sued, and the answer was they were doing their job. So there, to me, seems to be a clear issue with how they are trained to do their job. If their job is to serve and protect, they're missing the boat. Officers are promoted. Well, even if you come into the police department with a wonderful attitude about you're going to come and help, and I'm going to do all of these things, and I'm going to be officer friendly because I like the people that I'm serving, and you step into a culture of bad attitudes and a culture where you are then taught by your superiors and your coworkers to be hardcore, then where are we going? Because these are the people that are going to get promoted who are going to help promote this toxic culture. Little minor something. I live in the inner city. There was a police van, well, RV or whatever. They were working out of the van in my neighborhood. The officers parked their cars on the sidewalk. And I asked them, I said, excuse me, I don't think you should park your car on the sidewalk because we have handicapped people in wheelchairs who need to get down the sidewalk. You wouldn't do that in the suburbs. Well, I'm not in the suburbs and I'm not moving my car. And he didn't. Minor something. Me, as a concerned citizen, did I call downtown and say, I didn't think this was right? No, because my fear was that then they would start watching and following me. Because now I have become a problem. And the thing is, they're going to show me that I can't report them. I shouldn't feel that way. But that is the way I do feel about the officers. They're poorly trained, and somewhere along the line, courtesy and concern and care for the citizen has been left out. That's the end of my comment.
Thank you, Reverend Eklof. I think you were next. If not, then
I was actually in the process of lowering my hand right when you talked to me. I think
okay. So who was next? Harvey or Rabbi Settle? Okay, so go ahead, Reverend Harvey.
So my hand has come up and down because each time someone says what I had in mind, I was very careful not to repeat it. I think most people know that I'm not the meeting type of just talk to be talking. And Dr. Brown, Arlene Brown, she jumped on what I was going to say. I'm going to say this. I grew up in Memphis, and each year in school, we had a policeman to come to our school. And we actually thought that their names were officer friendly. We thought the police name was officer friendly because they came, they loved us as kids. And I grew up in Black schools, and they loved us as kids. They taught us to trust them. They taught us to call them if we had emergencies, if we got in trouble, if anything happened to us little Black kids, we could get to officer friendly. As a Black man, when the police get behind me now while I'm driving my cars. Initially, there was a time, and this is the truth, when the vehicles were new, I was getting stopped all the time. And I was being asked, whose vehicles are these? I turn corners, I go into 7-Elevens, I make the first turn that I possibly can to get out of what I think is now, as opposed to officer friendly, I think when I'm in the presence of the policeman, I'm in harm's way. And so accountability for me would involve holding the individual police as well as the law enforcement agencies responsible for effectively delivering just the basic services, really, that we think that they're trained to do, that they're paid to do, and that they agree to do. Control crime, maintain order, and treat individuals fairly within the bounds of law, and not have the Blacks, African Americans, and the brown skinned people afraid to call on those who are allegedly trained and paid to protect us. That's what accountability looks like for me.
Thank you, Rabbi Settle.
So I want to come at this from a little bit of a different angle, and I'll take Bob's model of, if you'll indulge me for a second in talking about something that may seem off topic. Those of you at Yale may know Charles Whitman, who wrote a book called Harsh Justice. And I think this is really relevant to what we're thinking about here, where he says that the difference between notions of equality in Europe after the French Revolution and notions of equality in the United States after the American Revolution were based basically on the institution of slavery, so that equality in Europe meant everyone would get treated like an aristocrat, and equality in the legal system in the United States meant everyone would be treated like a slave, would be degraded. And I think that part of our job in approaching the criminal justice system and policing as part of that is to reverse that model, right? Is to say, we're not going to be part of the degrading. And to also say, so in other words, that this harsh sort of punitive attitude about how you go about justice is not what we want to be doing. And I think that's really difficult, because it's really difficult, and particularly again in American culture, I think, to be honest, we often confuse revenge with justice. The idea that, you know, people want a murderer killed because it's going to give them a personal sense of equality or whatever, right? And so I think there's some really complicated but interesting and important conversations to have about restorative justice models here, about, and again, certainly I'll say this is where my spiritual tradition comes in the sense that I want repentance. I don't want punishment. I don't learn from punishment. I don't think that people change through punishment. I think people change through processes that lead to repentance. And how you do that in a formal system, of course, is really hard. And it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences, right? But how do we do it in a way that seeks transformation and has, in some sense, an optimistic view of human nature, right? Nobody is programmed, I don't think, you know, genetically to be a racist, you know, to act in such ways that you make people unsafe. So if we really want to talk about changing culture and changing the culture of policing, we also can't use their methods. We can't use the master's tool to tear down the master's house in that sense. So I don't have a specific answer to that, but I really hope that we can think about this and how we approach what it means to get justice.
Thank you. I just had to go back to a comment, because as I was thinking about this in your question, the thing of it is it's been hard to articulate for me what justice looks like for policing, because what justice has looked like for policing is that, you know, they have constantly gotten off. You know, there have been no repercussions. You look at the news reports in state after state, officers are, you know, as Daniel said, harming individuals that don't have any guns or weapons, saying that they are feeling threatened, and there's been no recourse other than the fact that they've gotten away with it. They've gotten, you know, been able to move on with their lives while the community has lost their family member, mothers, fathers, brothers, whomever. They've lost people. So when you say, what's the accountability look like? It's easy to tell you what it has looked like, and it hasn't been. There hasn't been any justice. And I think that's what makes it a little bit hard to articulate. What it should look like is definitely dismantling these systems, because the problem is not just in the criminal justice system in terms of the policing. It's also in those other systems. You know, you have to also talk about the DAs, you know, the judges. You have to talk about that whole continuum. You know, so it's like I said, so it was hard for me to articulate, because what it has looked like is perpetual trauma, perpetual cycle of misabuse. So ultimately, like I said, definitely holding them accountable, but definitely having that oversight that needs to be removed out of that system, so individuals can have justice. So I'll stop there, and I think Arlene was next, and then Board Member Perez.
Well, one of the things I'd like to share is I don't know enough about their job for me to really assess, because the excuse is they were just doing their job. Well, if within the realm of your job, you are allowed to take someone's life and there are no consequences, there's something wrong with the job description, or there's something afoul, as Celia said, in the system that will let this be perpetuated. So I need to know more about what your job will allow you to do as far as harming individuals and taking another person's life. While you're doing your research and you all talk to the officers, I would love to know what was going through your mind. What were you thinking? What result were you looking for when you pepper sprayed a 9-year-old? What did you want to get? Her feet in the car? Was it that serious? Okay. Now she's crying. She's saying it burns. And your response is, well, it's supposed to burn. Yeah, it's supposed to burn. And so there's something ultimately wrong with that. But, and the male officer that sprayed the young lady, he came up from behind. She was facing the female officer at first, who was getting ready to spray her, but dropped her canister. And when the little girl kind of turned, that's when the other officer attacked her, which again put her in shock. This is a child who is already traumatized by the events that had the police officers there in the first place. Are you there to be part of the solution? Or are you there to be part of the problem? And if you came as a problem solver, why are you not thinking as a problem solver? Because clearly there are issues with how the police visualize, operate, and think about the people that they are to serve and to care.
Thank you. Board Member Press. Oh, you're muted.
I think Reverend Nikoloff was before me, I believe.
Okay, go ahead.
Reverend Nikoloff was before me.
I thought I saw your hand up, but I can't with these hands. Who wants to speak?
Me.
If you want to
Okay, go ahead, Reverend Nikoloff, and then we'll come back to you, Bob.
Okay.
Y'all know whenever I talk, I reiterate about police culture, and I think that's super important. I think true accountability would mean that we could disband the Police Accountability Board, because it would be happening within the ranks of the department, that instead of the officers who are troubled being the ones who are shamed into silence, it would be a majority culture that would have a standard of the treatment of human beings, respect for the duty and the responsibility that is given to police officers, and it would empower those who want to see accountability happen to do that for themselves, so that in the locker room, when someone's joking and making white comments from a white supremacist worldview, instead of people being silent because they're afraid of being bullied, people would call that out, and it would never get out of that. There would be a policing. Police would police themselves that way. That when people feel troubled by what is happening, rather than feeling like they have to line up and be quiet, or else they'll lose their jobs, or they'll be shunned by organizations that help to uphold certain degrees of police lack of accountability, they would be the ones leading the charge. That they feel they could come to the PAB and seek allies and say, we want to help reform this thing because we love what the police department could be. We believe in protecting people. We believe in cultivating proactively a more healthy and a more safe Rochester community. And I believe that many of our police officers started policing because that's what they want. They want to have a better city for their kids, for their families, for their neighbors. And as naive as that might sound, I think that's where we should start from. So I think having a clearer vision of what holistic policing is, having a better understanding of like, why are you doing this work? What is your vision for this work? What is the actual purpose of police, or for public safety, or whatever we'd like to call them? What is your vision of the good for our city, and how will that take shape in particular practices? And what will we not tolerate? Because not only does it hurt the people we're called to protect, but it also hurts the institution. It degrades public trust, and it endangers everybody. So I think I would like to see accountability encouraged from within the department. If there's police officers watching this, whether your union rep tells you or not, like if you see something wrong, there's a police accountability board to help take care of that. I would love to have a PAB where we could also take complaints from officers who feel like they have no place else to go, so that they can actually be part of the solution that they long to see, rather than being shamed into silence. I believe that there are a lot of people on all sides of this issue who know that something is not right. And the best accountability, right? Those of us who've gone through any kind of recovery or treatment or whatever, struggle with depression, right? You know that the only way you're going to listen is if someone's been through it yourself. And so I would love to see more officers who have struggles also be part of that effort, and to feel empowered to do so. Work us out of a job, please. If you can do it better than us, so that we don't have to be here, you can have some of that money from the budget back to go to doing good things for the community. I would love to be worked out of a job.
Thank you. Board Member Press.
So can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So first of all, we can't have justice if there's no accountability. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, again, dismantling the processes and the procedures, because they seem to get away because they're following policies and procedures. They're doing their job. So like Board Member Brown said, what is their job? But we also have to see what is their training. What are their policies? What are their procedures? The reason why they're sent home with pay is because, and the reason why they're not fired is because they're going to sue the city and they're going to win, because they were following the policies and procedures that they were trained to do. And so it's cheaper to send them home with pay than allow them to sue for a tremendous amount of money and win, because they're going to win. So really is looking at the policies and procedures and changing those, because then they, if they were to change those policies and procedures, then they're not going to be able to hide behind them as they do now. And not necessarily hide, but that's how they're written. And so, it's always going to be they were doing their job. And so we really need to look at those. The other thing that concerns me, is that we're going against not just the union and the policing here, but the union and the policing nationwide, right? Because it's they got all the power across our nation. And so that's another thing that we need to look at, and how do we change? Because it's not just changing the culture here in Rochester, is changing the culture nationwide. And I don't know exactly how we do that, but that's a big concern for me, because they're always going to have the entire nation of policing behind them to protect them.
Yeah, and I would echo what you said, you know, the vagueness in the policies that protects them. If there's no concrete language, then, you know, they can interpret, that can be interpreted as whatever they want. So there needs to be intentional language in there, very clear, defined language. I think,
agree.
Dr. Harrison, you were next, and then Chair Wilson.
Thank you. During the Second World War, there were really horrific things done. And they were done by what were otherwise, in many cases, thought to be ordinary people. And so there have been a lot of studies done to try to figure out how do regular people become despicable, if you, for lack of a better word. One of the studies that's controversial, but it is worth reading, I think, and thinking about, is called the Stanford Experiment, where students were divided in half, and one half became guards and the other half became prisoners. And the whole study had to be stopped after just a few days because of the misbehavior of the guards and the depression of the prisoners. So that's one thing that I would suggest, is that I don't know if we understand why these things happen. So I'm not sure that we are yet have a good bead on how to correct it. The other thing Arlene brought up that reminded me of this is, if you haven't, get a copy of Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson. And you'll read about judicial systems, lawyers, policemen, all of whom just take terrible advantage of regular people. So somehow or another, our judicial system is flawed. Thank you.
Great.
Chair Wilson.
Hi, everyone. So thank you. I've been listening, just everyone, and just thinking about what accountability means to me, since we've been in this process for over a year, almost over a year now, and just, figuring out what does that mean now that you students are here with us? And, really I kept thinking about the idea, to kind of piggyback off of what Dr. Harrison said about, the idea of the Stanford Experiment, which said that anybody, no matter who you were capable of violence if the situation created itself in a way that caused for violence to exist, I guess, like you were, if there was no accountability and you were given the opportunity to otherize another person, would there be violence? Would something happen? And, when we think about policing and we think about the notion of the bad apple, I want to get away from bad apples, and I think that's the challenge for all of you, is that, there is no bad apple or good apple. Apples are apples. The thing is that the tree is rotting. We need to figure out what's going on with the tree. And instead of examining the fruit of the tree, we need to examine the tree. We need to tell the public about what that means, because unfortunately, the public, wants to see justice, which they deserve, but we also need to show them that justice also comes in examining the tree and pulling it out by the root and fixing it or doing whatever we need to do. That's what that means.
Very good, very good.
Did anyone else want to weigh in? Or was there, so that was really the first question, right? Did you want to repeat the second part?
I don't know if we want to, we were planning on sending a list of questions to Connor to have you all look at and review, and that way you can all have time to kind of think about them and then give us some, then Connor can report back to us with your thoughts, and that'll allow us to be able to read some stuff and also take all of this into account with our research. But this is, I'm going to speak for myself, but also for everyone, for the other students. I think this has been tremendously helpful in allowing us to guide our research further. And we actually will all be reconvening again tomorrow as a team to debrief and go over our research assignments. And I think this is going to help us really to fine tune what we need to look at for our proposal. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to thoughtfully respond to these questions and really spend this time, because this has been a very great learning experience for all of us. And I think we're all going to be able to take this work with us on tomorrow and in the future.
I guess, and I appreciate that, but as I'm sitting here thinking, I also want you guys to include yourself in that research. Think about how many times you've been stopped by police officers. Think about your interactions, if any, with police officers as you're starting to look at this work. Because I think that's going to be very important. One of the things that you mentioned in terms of research, I don't know if I heard anything about the people that are impacted by this. Yes, the community is impacted by, but people that, like Reverend Harvey talked about how many times he was stopped, so it's become normalized for him to feel like every time he gets in his car, he's going to get stopped by a police officer. So I would say take into account your personal experience, but also, is there going to be any research done with individuals that have been impacted by the justice system or by police officers? Are you going to be doing some information gathering of that as well? I'm not really sure, but I think that would be helpful to your research as well.
Can I just add to what Dr. McIntosh is saying, that kind of that Pavlovian response, from, Pavlov's dog, right? For those that may not be aware, we talk about, what happens with when a bell is rung and a dog would salivate, that was the beginning of, trying to figure out how patterns actually influence people. And so if you have a pattern of, I get stopped if I, if my light bulb is out and I get harassed by an officer, does that create a trauma response in me? How does that affect my life? And so those are some of the things that I would also consider when doing this as well.
Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate that and really appreciate your time. And Dr. McIntosh, it's funny, when the last question we had for you was actually relating to how we can incorporate the voices of people who experience harm by police officers, how those can be centered and supported throughout the process. And I think just being mindful of everyone's time and knowing you all have business, what we'll try to do, as Cecilia mentioned, is put that by email so that we can still incorporate your thoughts on that. But that's absolutely something that we want to consider and think through as part of this process. So I'm really glad that you raised that.
There's a document that Barbara Lacaware and Theodore Forsyth produced that's actually forms the basis for the formation of the PAB. Have you all seen that? Because it contains several vignettes of individual civilian interactions with police.
I'm not sure if we have, but I bet I could impose on Connor if we haven't. We may have that among our materials.
You can, Bob will scan each page and email it to you.
No, Bob won't.
I'll email it along. I promise.
Thank you.
Now, at the risk of being out of order, I would like very much to hear a final comment from each of the students. From something they have to add for tonight or something we will be looking forward to from them. I want to hear their voices again.
Sure, I can go first. So I am, Abby and I are going to be working on reviewing some boards that are already established and have some already established disciplinary procedures that we can work from and gain some inspiration from and some lessons learned from. And so I don't know if Abby wants to add anything else about that, but there are 6 in particular that we've been looking at, and we're very excited to learn from what's already been done and bring that to your attention.
Yeah, going off what Madeline said, I'm very excited to look at some of those other boards and also implement some of your ideas. You know, we want to treat them as models, but not follow them exactly. So I think that this meeting was so great, and it was so great to meet all of you and hear what you had to say.
I can pick it up. Liz and I have been working on the administrative proceedings part of the research, and a lot of what has been raised during this conversation has actually been something that when we met earlier today to discuss some of the questions that come up when you're reviewing these proceedings are about how does this work in conjunction with a job that has these policies in place already. And I think that this is going to help us to further deepen that research and really look at how policies and discipline interact with each other and how they can be applied in the future. And I don't know if Liz wants to add anything.
The only thing I'll add is I grew up as a low-income woman of color, immigrant family in Cleveland, and I saw a lot of over-policing in my community and like in my friends and in my family. And I am just really excited to have heard so much from you all on your vision, because I think that's exactly where I'm coming from, of how do we build communities that center our safety? How do we think about a different way of community accountability? And how do we make sure that work starts with all of us? So I just really appreciate getting to hear from all of you and to realize that like the way that I feel about these issues and the ways that I approach these issues, they're not crazy, they're not radical, they're the ways we should build our communities. And I feel so excited to be in community with you all and get to do this work together.
I'm going to interrupt. Liz, are you part of FGP? You part of First Generation Professionals at Yale? All right.
Yes.
What are you talking about? We got to talk.
And I just, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to echo what Liz was saying. But one thing that I'm going to take with me from the evening tonight, from a lot of things that have been said, is just this sense of disappointment in the police as this institution that's become untethered from their mission of actually providing real safety and what actual safety looks like in a community. And one of the images that I think will stick with me is from Chairperson Bob Harrison, or Board Member Bob Harrison, from his statement where he said what it would feel like to actually be surrounded by 5 or 6 police officers and feel safe. And what would it look like to create that kind of public safety, that kind of safety in a community? And so I think that's something that I'll be sort of thinking about and that'll stick with me as I begin this research. So thank you.
And this also may have been addressed, but I'm just wondering, some of this research will that include some of these other states that there has been no justice? Or will you be looking at some of these other states where police officers have gotten off and looking to see if there's any consistent themes with that?
They're not all finished.
Say it again.
They're not all finished.
I still have to go.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Harrison?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, hi, I'm Simone. I think the 2 experiences that I will bring into this is, oh, excuse me, we have a visitor, is actually the fact that I am a mother of 2 children and 2 young children, and Mr. Harrison's story and Dr. Harvey's story about their experiences of kind of being in a space as a person of color. I remember driving once and my car was running low on gas and I was so afraid to have to pull over because I actually was afraid that a police officer would engage with me and I would be sexually assaulted. So that I thought about how sad that is, that I don't even feel safe enough that if I had an emergency, I would rather someone else other than a public safety officer engage with me. And what Dr. Harvey said, it was about the fact that, there comes a point when your children are, when Black and brown children are small, they're cute and they're adorable, but then there comes a point when they're a threat. And I see that Like when I take my sons and my daughter out for Halloween for trick-or-treating, and the police officers are going around the neighborhood and they're passing out candy. And then they're like, oh, they're so cute. And I was just like, yeah, but in 10 years, you're going to stop him for no reason because he's just walking in our neighborhood and he might have a nice pair of shoes on, or he might, you know, look suspicious to you. So those experiences are what I carry with me when I'm engaging in this work. And it's in the back of my mind. I'm thinking about the women of color who have to guard themselves, or the young children, and what their experiences are going to be like in the next, you know, generation for them.
Got it, Dr. Harrison. Sorry, Simone, you're so quiet over there. Didn't mean to overlook you. Anyone else? No, go ahead.
I was just going to address your question, the answer to which is, hello, we're in very early stages of our research. And so these ideas are actually fantastic. The answer is, we don't know yet. We are still developing our plan, but these are fantastic suggestions. And this gives us plenty more to talk about our meeting tomorrow, other areas that we might explore. So really, really grateful for these ideas. And our hope is, so you'll hear from us in short order. We'll have lots of questions to share with you that we'd love to get your insights on. And we'll continue to check in as we work through. But our goal is that by the end, you know, we're on the academic calendar. So by the end of our semester, by the end of April, that we can have some draft of at least some of these procedures that we can share with you for your input and consideration.
Thank you. All right, so if there's no objections, I would like to, someone can move that we end the meeting. Unless Connor,
I move the re-adjourn.
There's one very small piece of business that we have to address. It's about the hiring update. I think we can certainly release the students from UB and Yale. And Allie, thank you so much for being here. You feel free to head out right now because everything else is. So thank you so much for being here. Very briefly, members of the board, just to remind people, we have these two open. I just want to update people on our hiring situation. We've got 80 plus applications for these two positions. We've got 2 pairs of board members who are helping us with some committees, kind of getting through the applications. Hopefully, we're going to be able to extend some interviews next week. I've already notified all the applicants where we're at with that. People are very engaged, still very excited to work. We've got phenomenal applicants, and I think we're going to have some great staff coming on board. The second thing that we're going to need to talk about very, very, very briefly is outside counsel, specific candidates that we may be retaining. And I'm just going to say that we could go into executive session to discuss those specific candidates if you want. So we just need to quickly vote on that to do it. And if we did, we just, if we did, we just have to tell the public we're going to be going offline with the stream to do that.
I'd like to move we go into executive session.
Second.
Okay.
I agree.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, people who've been watching, thank you. All the Facebook comments, I think we got 50 or something throughout this. 52 comments, people commenting questions, things. Thank you for that. We'll be back. We will respond. All right.
While you're making that transfer, Connor, though, I would like to say one thing, and that is I'm on one of your teams, and I'm happy to provide you with suggestions about the candidates, but you're the hiring person.
That's right. I am.
Okay.
I have ultimate say, but this is a team effort to figure out who the right candidates are.
Okay, do we want to finish the vote? Anyone opposed? Okay, anyone abstained? Okay.